Hey everybody, I'm Don with Alpha Moto. We're here today to talk a little bit about some carb synchronization sets that are offered up by Alpha Moto. They make a couple of different sets, so today what we want to do is concentrate primarily on this set, which requires a little bit of assembly. So we want to demonstrate the assembly and show you what the differences are. Mainly on this set, you have some purge type valves that need to go in line with these gauges so they work properly. If these are not installed, you'll get fluctuation throughout the gauge. This particular set, also offered by Alpha Moto, has those adjusters built in, as you can see. So if you're interested in a complete cycle of synchronizing carburetors on a motorcycle beginning to end, you can refer to this tool set. On this set here, we have our 4 gauges and we have our 4 small regulator valves. These are also the fittings for the different types of motorcycles that come with this kit. Pretty much covers all the metric and some British type fitment. We've got our gauges themselves, and then we've got our hoses that are going to connect to our carburetors. Also comes with a nice little instruction packet, so you have some quick reference. But what we're going to do here is just open some of these up. Want to make sure they're not kinked or anything like that. Okay, they are soft hose. And what we're going to do is connect one end to our valve. Okay, and we'll do this with all 4 so you can see how it looks completely together. Okay, now that our 4 hoses have our valves inserted on one end, we're going to make a minor modification to each hose. What we're going to do, each one, just going to go from the valve and measure. Oh, it doesn't have to be precise, about 3 inches. We've got about 3 inches of hose from the valve. I'm going to mark that or hold that area, and we're going to cut it right off. Okay, now we got our single hose, we've got our short hose with our valve. We'll take this short hose, and that's what we're going to connect to our gauge. It's a nice snug tight fit. We've got the valve adjuster facing out the same direction as the gauge, and then we take our remaining hose and connect to the other side of that adjuster valve. Now essentially what we have, this connects to our motorcycle, vacuum comes up through the hose, this small valve is able to regulate flutter in that gauge. And we'll do the same thing with all 4, and that's a one-time setup. Once you do that, you can leave it together, it's perfectly operational that way, good for storage. You can take it back apart if you want to put it in the box, but we'll just finish these up real quick so you can see the whole assembly. Now we can hang this on the motorcycle, and we've got the ability to synchronize 4 carburetors or 4 injector bodies. And when we do that, we're going to have slight fluctuation in these gauges. That's where we'll use these small adjuster valves to slow down that fluctuation. So that's the assembly of the Alpha Moto carb synchronization gauge set. Once again, Alpha Moto offers a couple of different sets. The only difference, this gauge set has the plastic valves that have to be installed. This gauge set has the valves built in. But let me remind you, they operate exactly the same. The procedure for synchronizing carburetors and throttle bodies is exactly the same with either one of these tools. We recently used this particular set to go through the full procedure of synchronizing carburetors and throttle bodies. Here's how you do that. Let's start with the Honda Magna here and the basics of what we need to do to connect the carburetor sync gauges. Now, keep in mind, please, that every motorcycle is a little bit different, and for specifics, you should really refer to a service manual to see exactly how to reach the parts down here you need to reach. In this particular case, with this Honda, all we've had to do is remove the fuel tank and seat and I've disconnected this bracket here so we can easily access the ports. They're actually intake ports where we're going to connect these gauges, and the screws, the adjustment screws for synchronizing the carburetors themselves. So before we make the connections, let me just see if I can show you. If you could take a peek down in here, you'll see this screw right here where the end of my screwdriver is. Okay, we've got one of those on each cylinder. There's another one also right back here, basic same location. Okay, this is a 4-cylinder motorcycle, so we've got 4 of them, one on each cylinder. What we're going to do is remove those screws, okay, and going back to your Alpha Moto kit here, we're going to use one of the adapters best suited for this particular model. Now, any one of them could work, just depends on the model you're working on and, access to that port. Some motorcycles do not have these screw type ports. They have a built-in spigot on the carburetor, could be on the carburetor body somewhere, or also on the intake, but it's a spigot that already exists. So in that case, we don't need these, okay? So next we'll get hooked up here and we'll synchronize some carburetors. So now that we've removed the plugs from the ports on the intakes, we're ready to install our adapters. Back to our kit, we've got some different adapters as you can see, some long, some short. Something else to keep in mind here, just like I said earlier, depending on the model, we have a different thread pitch, and they are indicated by a different color O-ring on these adapters. So, Hondas, in this particular case, use the finer thread pitch. For example, a Yamaha would use a heavier thread pitch there. So, we're going to install our tubes. Once again, mainly for access, whether you need a longer one or a shorter one. We're going up into our port here and just going to gently, now remember, this is all aluminum and brass. We don't need to be gorilla strong with this stuff, so we just gently thread that in like so. And you want it just snug enough so the O-ring is seated so we don't have any type of air leaks, okay? Now on this particular model, like I said earlier, we have one for each cylinder. This particular model on one cylinder already has a spigot. It's already built in. And that's because they use this, they have a vacuum line attached here that works the fuel, part of the fuel system, okay? We're not concerned about this, it can set aside, but we have a spigot here built in. So in actuality, we're using 3 of the Alpha Moto adapters, and 1 is currently part of the motorcycle. So as you can see, we've done the same on the other side. We're all set to connect our gauges and start the synchronization process. Okay, before we fire up, on this particular model, because we had to remove the factory gas tank, we have to install a remote fuel cell here. So this is just a small bottle with some gasoline in it. It has an on-off valve and a correct connection, and we are using the clamp. In this particular instance, we want to make sure we're dealing with safety first. We do not want a fire, we do not want a fuel spill, etc., etc. So our remote fuel is set up, it's turned on. We're going to start the motorcycle, take a look at what we got. All right, the first thing you're going to notice with any synchronization gauge, there's a lot of flutter and fluctuation. That's what these small adjustment valves are for here. Because motorcycles' engines have different levels of vacuum, these have to be adjustable. So what we want to do is go in here and try to eliminate as much of this fluctuation as possible by turning these dials. And if you watch, slowly turn them, your fluctuation comes down. Now you don't want to completely eliminate the fluctuation because now it's shut. Now we're not getting any kind of reading. So we want to get it so it's opened up and then bring it in just so she settles down just nice. So it's readable. And we're going to go down the line and do the same with each one. That's just about right. You're seeing a slight amount of fluctuation that's telling you that you've got a good vacuum reading, okay? Come over to the third one. We're just going to keep going until we get that needle to slow way down. Get them all about the same. At this point, we're not concerned where the needle is. We just want to eliminate the fluctuation. And that's pretty good. Next thing we're looking for is for all of these needles to be reading the exact same vacuum. Okay. Now we've got 3 that are all almost right on the money, very close. But our 4th one over here, a little bit off. So this is where we need to make our adjustment. The important thing to remember here is which cylinder is this hose connected to, so we can adjust the proper screw. We start turning on the wrong screws, we're going to mess all of them up. So we know this is the right front cylinder because that's what I'm connected to. So we're going to go in and make our adjustment with our special tool, and let's see how close we can get it. Got our special tool right here. This can be a little tricky. You need to kind of keep an eye on the gauge and work your way in here to the adjusters. Some adjusters are harder to get to than others. See what's going on. Take a look at our gauge. We're headed in the right direction here. Right about a little bit more. All right, looks like we've got all 4 right where they need to be. Right at about 8 or 9 foot-pounds of vacuum. Inches of vacuum, I'm sorry. Nice smooth idle. And that's it. Okay, now that we've got our carburetors all synchronized on our Honda Magna here, I hope everybody enjoyed the demonstration and explanation of the Alphamoto Carb Sync tool. And just to reiterate, earlier I had mentioned about a special tool to make the actual adjustments. Alphamoto does have that tool, they sell it. It's not always necessary, depending once again on the model you're working on. Sometimes a simple screwdriver is adequate, but this tool, very effective for some of the more difficult adjusters that reaches up inside. This is also used for adjusting the mixture screws on these carburetors. Multi-tool, very high quality, along with our synchronization setup here. Super nice kit, very high quality, heavy duty, all the pieces and parts you need for most any model. Alphamoto Carb Synchronization Tool.